This is the Mental Metal Podcast, and I am your host, Coach Matt Tillman. I'm a former athlete, teacher, coach, and athletic director that switched careers after surviving cancer and a stroke in the fall of 2020. And I'm also a dad of a son and a daughter that were successful high school athletes that went on to college. Now I use that experience along with my ICF coaching certification when helping teams, coaches, and athletes from all over the country. Each week, I will pose a specific question that will help coaches of all types better understand mental toughness. In the Mental Metal Podcast, coaches will learn to help their athletes overcome adversity without being the adversity they need to overcome. Welcome back to the Mental Metal Podcast. I am your host, Coach Matt Tillman. And I am beyond excited for this podcast. I'm always excited for all of them, but not necessarily for the reasons you think on this one. Sure, I am absolutely stoked about having a former D1 basketball coach and now a current Big Ten assistant coach. Absolutely. That's awesome. But I'm very excited because of what he ended up had to say, and I wasn't sure where he was going. I got a hold of Coach Lowery as a contact through Coach Korn, who was the last episode. They had worked together, and I just always love hearing different people's perspectives, especially coaches. When I had an opportunity to interview Coach Lowery, I jumped at the chance. So not only is he the highest profile coach I've ever interviewed, but he's also the one that so far has most embodied my thoughts on mental toughness and mental health. And that's especially true, how excited I am, because it makes it even better that he and I grew up in similar eras and in the same basic geographic location. Coach Lowery is just a couple years older than me. I remember watching him when I was in high school, seeing him play in college. And he grew up in Evansville, Indiana, which is the town that I would, as a youngster would travel to whenever I needed to hit a mall or see a concert. Now, the fact that that town was still about 75 miles away from my family farm tells you a little bit about the population or lack thereof of southeastern Illinois, but I digress. We grew up in the same eras, in the same geographic location, basically. And because of that, it's pretty obvious to say that we both grew up with the same sort of old school coaches, playing for the same sort of tough, very passionate communities. And yet now we both, agree on the best way to develop mental toughness in players. And it's not the same as that same old school mentality. So the fact that we both have that same mindset now, but came from where we came from is, to be blunt, it's the validation that I was looking for. And having that validation come from one of the most, successful, a coach coming from one of the most successful conferences in the nation, well, all the better. A little bit about me. I intend to tell more of my story in this podcast as we go, but I feel compelled to tell a little bit of what this validation I was looking for. So a couple years, if you don't know, and bear with me if you know all of my story, but a little bit, I think it fits with this podcast and this guest. A couple years ago, I did decide to become a life coach. I had come from being a educator and a basketball coach. But I, after overcoming some of my own struggles, I decided to become a life coach. But when I started, I wasn't sure what clientele I was originally looking for. And after working with several types of clients, everything from businessmen and businesswomen to educators to even some cancer survivors, I finally figured it out and found my calling and have decided to have my main focus to be working with athletes of all ages. I knew firsthand that many athletes struggled with anxiety, performance issues, and lack of confidence. And those were the same struggles that I had when I was recovering from the 1-2 punch of cancer and a stroke that I dealt with in 2020. And coaching helped me get through that. So I reasoned that athletes would respond to this inquiry-based coaching that I'm now trained in. Now, no one was telling me to go that way, and it's certainly not the most lucrative coaching path to take. If I wanted to make more money, I could go, get into executive coaching for CEOs, but instead I founded Mental Metal Coaching, and I started catering to athletes and focusing on them, helping them gain mental toughness. And I loved the idea, and I had a lot of people tell me it was a great idea. But the problem with building a business around a new idea, because again, this was my clientele, nobody had suggested that to me. The problem with a new idea like this is that you have to explain the idea to someone before you even get around to selling the idea. And that can be difficult, especially if you're not a born salesman like I'm not. So, for instance, if I were to tell you that I make the best kitchen knife in the world, I would only have to demonstrate why I think mine is the best kitchen knife in the world. I wouldn't have to explain to you anything about the usefulness of a kitchen knife. You already know. But what is not common knowledge is that my type of coaching, this life coach, this inquiry-based coaching, is useful for athletes. There are just not many people doing that. And it's, it was, and it still is a problem for me to sell this idea to people. I have worked with various marketing companies, and they all struggle to help me sell what they say is a very specific niche, okay? Whatever that means. And while that's been a struggle, there's been two things that have really helped me keep the business going. And one is continued support from clients. Most parents are so impressed with the changes in their athlete that they ask me to, continue working with their child periodically and as needed. They just see so much progress. They ask me to work monthly or again, as needed. But then the second thing that has kept the business going is from clients from these, or referrals from these same clients that are now satisfied customers. What my clients and the athletes have come to find out is that an athlete talking to somebody about these fears, these anxieties, these problems is extremely useful, right? What they're finding out is that mental toughness and mental health can be developed and taught. A lot of people don't always think that or if it is, it's taught, the old school way. But having an athlete talk with a trained individual does wonders for lessening their anxiety, increasing their confidence. And often the difference is not just noticeable, but it's life-changing. And in the coaching business, we call that transformative. That's what we're shooting for. We're shooting for that life-changing mindset, right? So it's not just an accident when that happens. But back to the topic at hand, back to the podcast and back to my guest. Coach Chris Lowery, my guest today, made me just extremely happy when, unprompted, he started talking about how their players, he is an assistant coach now for Northwestern in the Big Ten, and he started telling me about how their players regularly meet with a trained team psychiatrist. And in this interview, you're going to hear him mention how important that is for the players to discuss their issues with an impartial, trained individual. When I ask him about mental toughness,
he's going to describe these very deliberate actions and how they, again, work with a team psychiatrist, and how they share, and how the coaches share information with their athletes. Chris is a phenomenal defensive coach. He has increased the defensive ability of the Northwestern once he became the assistant there. And he helps develop these very gritty, tough-minded defensive teams. So it was just, again, it was that validation that I knew to be true, but hearing it from him, whenever this guy developing these teams, the proof is in the pudding, and he's talking about how they, it's okay to share information with athletes, and it's okay for them to meet with someone, to develop that mental toughness through a conversation. So it's, and you'll hear him in this interview, it's gone are the days of shut your mouth and get on the baseline. I'm sure that they run an extremely intense practice that is not, for the timid. It's not for the weak, but that's just the point. As a coach, you don't have to be the constant hammer beating kids into submission. Mental toughness can be developed through a conversation and through intentionality and with mental tools. The adversity will be there. Sports, the adversity will be there, right? It's the conversation and these tools that help them get through it. And I know this to be true because I see it happen every day with my clients. It was just so refreshing to hear it from such a highly successful coach. So, but enough from me. Let's hear from Coach Lowery in his own words.
Coaches, empower your athletes to overcome adversity with the Mental Mettle Academy. Teach them to face and conquer hardship without adding extra pressure. Visit the link in the show notes and enter the code METTLE, that's METTLE, at checkout for a special listener discount. The Mental Mettle Podcast is brought to you by our friends at Quick Cut. Quick Cut is the new alternative to Huddle. It's no secret why Quick Cut is the fastest growing platform in the country. Their video analysis platform has everything you need. Plus, you'll get triple the storage at about half the price. And now get even more when you use the promo code 50hours for 50 hours of free video storage. Make the switch. You'll be glad you did. Visit quickcut.com today.
So on today, on the Mental Mettle Podcast, our question is a question I ask often. Anytime I get a voice and a coach that I want to pick his brain, I ask about how coaches can build and develop mental toughness in players, and in this case, basketball. My guest today is Coach Chris Lowery. Chris got I'm so excited to pick his brain a little bit. I grew up not far from where he was a high school standout in Evansville, Indiana, and he went on to play at Southern Illinois University under the legendary Coach Rich Herron, which is, as a Southern Illinois guy, that was a big deal for me. And he helped SIU to a couple tournament berths back in 93 and 94, right about when I was graduating high school. So I was paying attention and had a great career there. He ended on, was assistant at Southern Illinois, Kansas State, and then he was a head coach at Southern Illinois for 8 seasons, gave him 2 MVC championships and 3 NCAA tournaments, and now he's the assistant coach at Northwestern in the Big Ten. And I see here, Coach, he also was the inaugural winner of the Howard Moore Assistant Coach of the Year. So I'm impressed that you're here to talk to me. So that's just the first question I'll ask you here is just whenever I say mental toughness and how to develop it and how to build it, what do you got for me, Coach?
Well, I think sometimes it comes from within yourself, and sometimes, that mental toughness comes from who coaches you. And if you play for a fiery guy or a guy who wears his heart on his sleeve, you're probably going to be just like, that guy. And, obviously I played for the legendary Rich Herron, and Coach Herron was fiery, and Coach Herron loved the game. And if you didn't have those same instincts and attitudes, you were not going to get in the game for Coach Heron. So, picking up some of that from him, and probably the number one guy is my high school coach, Gerald Van Devender, who was really a great high school coach who really pushed us really, really hard on a daily basis and taught us to compete with each other. Don't be friends in practice. I think at a young age, that's hard to do when you're in the same high school and your same classes with your buddies. And then when you go to practice, you're not supposed to act like you're friends, but you're supposed to compete. And that's a thing that's kind of lost because nobody wants to make their friends look bad. But if you approach it that way, then it comes across that way. But if you approach it in a way that it's to get each other better, then it makes you better in the long run.
Yeah, and like I said, we kind of grew up in the same eras, and that's I didn't play for anybody as illustrious as who you played for, but it was the same kind of mentality. It was like, I think that, I don't know, has coaching changed at the high school and some levels that have affected that mentality, or what's different?
I think some of it is coaching, obviously. Some of it is just the change of the world. It's different. Kids are raised different. I grew up in the time where when your coach told you to do something, you didn't question it. You just did it because you believed that he knew what he was talking about. I think now, kids want to know why they're doing it. What are the benefits of me doing this going to help me personally? When it used to be, how can I help the team? I want to help the team. I want to be the best player for the team. Now it's, how can I be the best version of myself to help be the best version of our team? So I think that's the biggest difference. But when you get a good group that buys into that, that's where you see the teams that are playing really well in the NCAA tournament or on the high school level that really do a good job playing together.
So how do you, if kids come to you like that, like I said, you've been at several different, D1 schools, and now you're in the Big Ten. Like, is that the way, like, are the kids that come to you, have they changed? I mean, you've been coaching for a while. Have you seen that change?
The biggest change has probably been parenting. The parents, if you go to watch an AAU game and you just watch the stands, I mean, it's like kind of like a soap opera at times. It's the craziness and the approach of how people treat the referees, the AAU coaches, the other family members. It's really, really at times crazy. But then again, you go watch other AAU programs and they get it. And it's really about making sure the kids understand that by winning, you get scholarship offers, not by showing up, And the one big thing that people, always, get mad about AAU basketball is that kids aren't playing to win. They're playing for scholarships. Well, if you were to show up at the EYBL Peach Jam, you would see that those dudes are playing to win a Peach Jam championship. It's a very big deal.
Yeah.
So that's not necessarily true either. It's just having the balance of understanding, are you scholarship chasing? Are you trying to become a better player? And are you trying to get better, in the summer and use that as a tool to help your high school team win state championships?
Yeah. How do you, I'm assuming you spend some time on the recruiting trail. How do you, as you're, and you can't do it without going to AAU tournaments. Right. How do you suss that stuff out? Like, how do you pay it? How much does that factor in when you're watching kids in these AAU tournaments and even their parents? And how do you evaluate that stuff?
Well, you just people watch. You watch your player. You watch how they respond to coaching. Are they always looking at their family members in the stands instead of looking, at their coaches or trying to listen to what the coaches are asking them to do? Because they're not going to listen to that guy. They're probably not going to listen to you when they come to you. And I just think the biggest thing, you just see how people are. Because you get the difference between college and high school. In high school, you play somewhere because you live in that district. In college, we go get who we want. That's the biggest, kids don't understand. Like, if it's a business, if you don't produce, we're going to go get another guy the next, recruiting cycle that will produce. And it's the business side of college athletics. And that's what, a lot of people don't understand. When you're trying to get these scholarships, you're actually joining, literally some Fortune 500 companies. It costs $85,000 to go to Northwestern.
Yeah.
It's a very illustrious degree, a top 10 university in the world. You get a piece of paper from there, you're set for life. So we have to recruit a certain kind of kid who academically can have success here, along with the basketball side of it too, in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and so in my profession now, I end up working with some D1 athletes, and I've worked with kids that have been on the other side of that business and have really struggled with that, and that mentality. And I don't know what's the advice, from being in that position. What do you have for athletes that are headed to the business-like world? What athlete, or what advice do you have for them?
Well, you should pick the school that loves you. I grew up in Indiana. One of my best friends, Calbert Cheney, played with me in high school. Another good friend of mine who played with me in high school is Walter McCarty. Calbert Cheney went to IU. Walter McCarty went to Kentucky. Chris Lowery wasn't good enough to go to either one of those. So I had to go to the school that loved me. And because of that, I had everything Coach Herring told me came true. I was going to get a degree. I was going to have a great life for myself after I got that degree. I was going to win championships and go to the NCAA tournament at Southern Illinois. That was the truth from a genuine man. And what he told me happened. That doesn't necessarily always happen, the truth in recruiting. And going somewhere where they literally love you versus somewhere where they just see you as a ranked player and we want to add value to our program is something you got to think about, because sometimes the place you love and want to be at is not the best place for you. And sometimes like kids get caught up with, the blue blood side of who's recruiting them as opposed to who can really help them reach their end game, whether that's being a professional player, whether that's getting into college coaching afterwards, or just being having a great degree from an institution. So those are things that you have to look at and ask yourself, if I didn't play basketball at this school, would I still love going here? And that's a question that a lot of kids will probably tell you no.
Yeah, and that's amazing. How do they, a kid that's highly recruited get in place, and how do they find that? How do you figure that out, like in a recruiting trip, right? How do you be like, oh, this place loves me and this place doesn't? It's difficult.
But it is difficult. But I think how their approach to recruiting you shows you. So it happens before the visit. If they've continuously been in contact with you, continuously shown you that you are the guy they want in their program, and then when you go to the visit. And most of the time kids go more than once. They go to a game, and then they'll go to a football game, and then they'll do an official visit, and where they're there for 48 hours with their parents and their families to really see if this place is it for me. And you have to do your research. You have to do a thorough research instead of being in love with the team colors and, oh, that's my favorite color. I've loved that team since I was a little kid. You gotta fall in love with how can this program help me? And that's not a selfish way to think about it, because the number one thing, a happy player is a good player. When players aren't happy, they're not good players, and they're disgruntled and they want to leave. But when you have happy guys, those are the teams that usually win.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. Like you got to go somewhere that you're happy. It's good for everybody. How do you what's the difference between? I mean, you get not everybody, like everybody that you bring in wants to be, the stud, right? They, when you get recruited, you coming from that, like you said, that top level AAU or that, state championship, whatever. And they're going to be the guy, right? They said, I'm going to be him, right? What's the difference makers for the kids that make it and stick it out? Because college basketball is hard. What's the difference between the kids that make it and that don't?
Well, the kids that make it are usually the ones that want to be coached. Number one, really good people want to be challenged, want to be coached. They want to be told what can make them better, because they're never satisfied. And those kids are the hard workers. Those are kids that are self-motivators, not procrastinators. Like sometimes the kids that don't make it, they fall in love with recruiting, and the process of recruiting is much easier to like than the process of being a really good player. Because people say trust the process. The process is hard. The process is difficult. The process is not fun. But we tell our guys all the time in Northwestern, it's not going to always be fun, but it's going to be worth it. And that's what you got to attempt to think about as a young player. Man, this is not going to always be fun, but when I overcome my fears, use my left hand in traffic, or when I can feel confident about my three ball, shooting it without hesitation, I'm going to be a good player.
Yeah.
And trusting in that process that I'm going to put enough work ethic where those things are going to be my strengths in the future, and really not fall in line with the right now mentality of everything. I want to be a starter right now. I want to be the best guy on a team full of seniors when I'm a freshman right now, which is probably not going to happen.
No.
And just trusting that the people that recruited you have in place and in play a plan for you. And you got to realize that it's not going to be overnight. And, overnight success takes a long time. And that's what people don't understand.
Yeah, no, it does. We get to see when people are at the top of the mountain. We don't see the climb.
Right.
You have any stories of, like, you talk about these kids that come in and they all think they're going to be, the man right away. And I know you're looking for good kids when you recruit, but I'm sure that not every kid that you've recruited comes and shows up and is not as ready and mentally tough that you need. You got any success stories for helping kids develop that toughness that they needed?
Well, I think the old way used to be you just smashed them out and made them.
Yeah.
You just got to be tough, and you just worked them hard and you worked them long. But now there's a different way with the mental health people that are involved, and our psychiatrists and our people that kids can actually talk to. That's another way of reinforcing mental toughness, is talking about why you think you're not tough, and why you think you're not a good player, and what do I need to do to become a good player. Sometimes talking about that to people that you're close with is not a good thing. You need an unbiased opinion on who doesn't see you as a competitor, but sees you as a person that they're trying to help. And the new thing with the mental health is really saving a lot of professional guys' careers, because they've lost confidence, or they don't understand why they can't hit a curveball anymore, or can't, I can't make that read in the pocket as a quarterback. What's wrong with me? And sometimes it's just as simple as talking to someone about it really can help you gain confidence, as opposed to benching somebody, as opposed to cutting them, as opposed to saying you're not any good anymore. Now you see more people dealing with their sports mental health people, and really saving their careers and helping them prolong, their careers.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it's the old, like you said, what we grew up, and I'll never forget the old what was it, the Bobby Knight thing about the only motivator is the bench, right? And he had that whole thing, yeah, and that was the way, right? And I'm not saying that there's not a little bit to that, but I'm so thrilled to hear you say that. You're talking about your guys go and meet with sports psychologists and things like that. That's what I do, and that's what I'm trying to get through to people a lot of times, is that conversation about it is just as important as the action and having that conversation. So I love hearing that. When did that change? Because when did you first start coaching college ball?
My first year in college coaching was 95, 96 at Wren Lake.
Okay. Wren Lake, nice.
Junior college.
So you straight out of college, you went and grad assistant?
Well, straight for when I had a 5th year of school, so I was the student assistant practice every day guy for Coach Herron, and so he said, "I'm gonna pay for your school. You're gonna practice every day for me." So. My 5th year of school, I actually practiced every single day, and that's when I kind of got the coaching bug and really wanted to do it. And then from there, I went right to Wren Lake and 2 years there for Coach Tim Wills. And so coaching every level, man, junior college, Division II, low major, mid major, high major, being a head coach, and So, I ran the gamut of things to do as an assistant coach and on the way up.
Yeah. What do you love about where you're at now?
I love, like, it's funny. Like 20 years ago, I was one of the youngest assistants in the Big Ten, when I was at Illinois. Now I'm a veteran, and I'm an older veteran now. And to be able to come full circle and be back in this league is, I mean, it's number one, it's gratifying because it's a great league. It's one of the best in the country, and the history and the legacy of so many teams. And the good thing about it being at Northwestern is that we're, for a program that's been continuously on the lower end, to be on the uptick and to be here and be a
Yeah.
part of things that happen. Last year, first year ever beating the number one team in the country. First time winning 5 straight Big Ten games in a row. Finishing second in the Big Ten last year, which, everybody had us pick 12 or lower. So those type of things got me so excited about being back. I was excited before. Now I'm even more excited about our chances in the future at Northwestern.
No, it's fun to watch. I follow that league since I was a kid, so you're right. Northwestern was always usually forgot about them, but it's, you guys are coming up. So I want to take a break here for just a minute. When we come back, I just want to talk about a little bit about some advice you'd have for coaches of, like you said, you've done so many different levels, about how to face that, see setbacks and see adversity, and how they can help kids get over those things without the help of, a Northwestern psychiatrist, right? To be able to do that, right? So, because that's a nice thing to have, but not everybody's got that. So let me take a bit of a break, and we'll be right back. In a recent study done by the NCAA, it was revealed that 31% of male athletes and a staggering 48% of female athletes experienced depression or anxiety at some point. As adults, it's crucial that we address these issues and provide the necessary support systems for the athletes that we care about. And that's where mental mental coaching comes in. My student athlete coaching program is dedicated to helping young athletes develop mental toughness on and off the court. So join me at Mental Mental Coaching, and together let's empower athletes to overcome the mental obstacles and enhance their performance and lead fulfilling lives. Visit the website shown in the show notes or contact me directly to learn about the program. Invest in the mental well-being of your athletes with Mental Mental Coaching and see them excel.
The Mental Metal Podcast is brought to you by our friends at Quick Cut. Quick Cut is the new alternative to Huddle. It's no secret why Quick Cut is the fastest growing platform in the country. Their video analysis platform has everything you need. Plus, you'll get triple the storage at about half the price. And now get even more when you use the promo code 50hours for 50 hours of free video storage. Make the switch. You'll be glad you did. Visit quickcut.com today.
And we are back with Coach Chris Lowery, and we're talking about coaching at all different levels. He's worked from JUCO to D2 to mid-major, now to the Big Ten. And we're talking about, the question I wanted to ask him was, what advice does he have for, I market this, or, I dedicate this course or this class to, or I'm sorry, this podcast to coaches of all levels who are trying to develop some mental toughness in their athletes. And as you said, I think the old school way was, if they're not tough, we're just going to run them till they're tough. Well, then that can create a whole lot of animosity. It really it damages the relationship between the player and the coach, and that's not what you want. So I'm really looking for some strategies here that you might have for developing some mental toughness without, like you said, get on the line.
Right. I think with nowadays you have to challenge the team. When you want a certain guy or a certain group to be tougher, you challenge the team and give them a task. And you say, hey guys, in this next 2-minute segment, we have to get this done. If it's not done, the whole team is running. So it's basically, this is, or we'll put, however many minutes in overtime. You put the overtime minutes on the clock and say, hey guys, we have to get this done by these overtime minutes. And if we don't, we lost. So be prepared to deal with whatever comes with us losing here in practice if we don't make these times. And just finding ways to make games out of stuff to trick them into being mentally tough and to trick them into thinking, man, this is fun, when it's really a learning lesson for them. And we've done things like that to help our guys. But we've also, just pushed them. I mean, still pushing a young man, still taking a young man and having him realize I didn't think I could go there, and I went even further. Like you need to test your limits. And as a young player, it's easy to hit the quit button. When we talk about guys who hit the quit button and quit all the time and quit when it gets tough, sometimes you can't let them do it. You got to push them and you got to ride them and make them see, man, you really can do this. You're good at this. And with consistent, positive talk to them while you're pushing them and being hard on them, they understand that you care about them. Because that's all the kids nowadays, like back in the day, we didn't, coach didn't care if you loved them, hated them, it's just the way it was. Now the kids really got to think that you care about them for them to play for you. We were so bad. So when I grew up, we were so scared that if Coach V didn't like us, he wouldn't play us. And we were so scared that if we did things wrong in practice, that we knew we were going to be running after practice, and the fear of dealing with him, as opposed to just doing this play right, be perfect, do this task the right way, was way easier than dealing with his wrath after practice.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned, like, I think in the old days it was a given that the kids were going to respect the coaches, right? And
Absolutely.
and I don't want to get onto this whole thing about society, but that's changed, right? It's not just a given that they're going to go in and respect the coaches. But I think that in order for them to work hard for you, you've got to get that respect somehow.
Right. I think now with the new kids, respect comes from information. Respect comes, even if they see banners hung up with what you did in the past, that doesn't matter to them until you can explain to them how I'm going to get to that banner. Then none of that matters. And explanation, through film, through testimonies of former players, through, they've got to see it work for them before they believe in it. And that's just the way it is, as opposed to playing blindly and just trusting. What the coach said, like you said, they have to see it work for them before they believe in it. And that's just the way it is. And I tell you a funny story about Coach Aaron. When I was a freshman, I was late to practice, and I was so scared. And Coach met me at the door and said, hey, come on in, Coach. Come on in, Chris, have a seat. I want you, you're all right. Everybody's and I looked at it, they were mad. I can tell they were mad at me because they knew something was going to happen. Coach Aaron just put me in the middle of the floor, and he goes, well, what kind of soda you like? I said, oh, Coach, I like Sprite. And so Coach had one of the managers go get me a Sprite. He set me down in the middle of the floor and opened the Sprite and said, when you're done drinking that soda, they'll be done running. And so you wouldn't believe the things that was being said to me when they ran past me when I was in the middle of that floor. And just small stuff. Coach Aaron never once said a coarse word to me. That he was a Christian man, good man. But that right there taught me something without yelling at me, without cursing at me. But the team mob sometimes is so important that you can pull people in that don't necessarily believe in it. So when you get the mob in the right direction and you get the team, and I was never late because I was scared. Those seniors were. I was like the last to go to the locker room because I was like so nervous what they were going to do to me if I went to the locker room after they just got done running the whole practice.
Oh, you don't know that it probably didn't happen to all of them at some point, right? But yeah. So maybe I'm wrong, but could you imagine even doing something like that now?
I think the kids would really laugh at it. Like they would think it would be funny, until I said, well, we're going to run.
Yeah.
They would probably say, I'm not running for him. And
Yeah.
that's what you did back then. You picked up your teammate. You did what you're supposed to do. Leave no man behind. Like, even though he screwed up, you better pick him up. Now it's different, and you got to learn how to fight through it and get it to that point where, guys will say, hey man, we got to do this together. This is a team. One guy fails, we all fail. And that's really the point, and the things you got to drive across with the new era player is everything we do together, all the individual stuff you want, you'll get it if we have a good team.
Yeah. No, and it's changed. A lot of it's changed, but a lot of it's the same. I think the end result has to be the same. They gotta do things for each other. They gotta respect the coach, but how you get around to those things it's different. It just has to be different. So I gotta ask, transfer portal. How does that? Yeah, I know, and I'm a fan as much as anything. And as you and I talked, I got a kid playing college basketball, so it's always a conversation. And I work with athletes. How does the need to be tough and mentally tough and being successful? How does the transfer portal play into that?
Well, the transfer portal. We've taken advantage of it. You have to. It's just the way it is. You could either not be with the new times and fall behind and try to be stubborn and try to only get high school kids, and then everybody else is getting third and fourth and fifth year guys on the transfer portal. You're just not going to win with all young guys. It's so hard to do. Experience is the name of the game in college basketball nowadays. So the transfer portal, you're going to get two ways. And I think about my time as a coach at Southern Illinois, as assistant and a head coach. We redshirted a lot of guys.
Yeah.
Darren Brooks was back-to-back offensive, defensive player of the year. Well, he never would have got to the second year with this new. He would have went major. He'd have been gone. Somebody would have stolen from us. In the NIL, you give them money, they're gone. Jamal Tatum probably would have been gone after his junior year. We had so many guys that redshirted that in their redshirt junior year, they would have not played their fifth year in Carbondale. And that's just the way of the world right now. And, if you can, the old days, when you got a guy and you took a transfer, you had to set out.
Right.
And you developed a relationship with the guy sitting out, so he became your player in a year. Now, the good thing about it not sitting out is that player can play for you right away. But the thing about it is that guy who sat out usually got 24 credit hours and graduated on time. And now, because he sat out and he couldn't play, he just went to school for the whole year. Now that's eliminated. Now you're just playing, games, and you're playing again without that extra 24 credit hours that you got by sitting out and not playing.
How does it affect? And I get the benefit, right? As a coach, you're like, hey, we need a stretch four. Let's go find one, right? Especially you're in the power conference now. You're in the Big Ten, so it's like you're shopping a little bit at times, right? I get it, but how do you keep? Let's say you get a good freshman coming in, and you're like, man, we want him to be. We think he's going to be the guy in 2 years. Well, he's not happy being on the bench for 2 years. How do you keep that?
That's the getting them to trust the process, and it's so hard because they can leave and go somewhere and have instant playing time. But my old thing, and when we talk to kids about transferring, it's what I heard a long time ago. The grass ain't always greener; it can be spray painted. So you can get over there and it looks green. You're like, uh-oh, I should have stayed where I was at. So a lot of that's happening now that kids can just take off and go. And then they realize, man, I had it really good where I was. But just because you can go do something and not sit out doesn't mean you should do it. And those are the hardest to keep, the young guys who have success and then they realize they're a good player. Well, let me see who's interested in me now. Well, why would you do that? You're a good player here. Well, I just want to test the waters and see,
Yeah.
where it's at. And you never want your kids to do that, but again, a happy player is a good player, man. So you just got to figure it out and make sure that you are constantly in touch. And in the spring, you'll ask a lot of college guys. Most of the time, we're recruiting our own players to stay. In this day and age, we're not recruiting a lot of new guys yet. We're recruiting our
That's
good returners to come back, and you have to.
That's amazing. I didn't thought about it that way, but man, it's like as an assistant who's there, you part of your job is recruiting. It's like there you go. Like I got to go wine and dine my own player.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Spend time with them, and show them where tell them what the vision is for next year for them. You don't want to ever not think about your returners and get so caught up with who's coming that you don't make sure that who's staying and coming back and returning aren't happy.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. So have you had any situations and I don't know this, but I'm just thinking like a kid that's having a tough year and he's like, man, this is hard. These guys are pushing me. I think I'm just going to hit the easy button and I'll just transfer because I know it's going to be easier somewhere else.
Yeah. I mean, that happens a lot. I mean, you can look at how many guys were in the portal, staggering amounts, over 1,000, before, the portal opened up. Like some guys transferring don't even have like schools recruit, like they don't even have the numbers where somebody else would say, hey, I want to take that kid. They're just transferring just because, like you said, I'm not happy. I'm going to bet on myself. That's the new saying, bet on myself and try to go somewhere else. And hopefully that turns into something positive for me as a player.
So, and I mean, part of me is like, that's a very positive, confident attitude, but there's problems with it. And
yeah.
And I'm not gonna ask you this question and want you to say anything, but there are also probably coaches that aren't doing it the right way either.
Yeah, I mean, but it is what it is. Like you can't, you can't worry about how guys do it. You just got to do it how you do it and do it to your best ability. And there's a reason why last year there was over 300 kids who didn't have a scholarship to play Division I that gave them up getting into the portal. At the start of this year, there's guys who having to go D2 NAI because they didn't have a scholarship because, hey, thinking the grass is greener. It was spray painted for them. People were telling them, hey, you're going to get these offers if you get in the portal. Well, those offers didn't come.
So I didn't realize that 300 guys last year thought, hey, I'm going to go somewhere else. Somebody will pick me up D1, and they ended up at a lower level.
Yeah.
Which isn't always, you coach some D2 too. It's not like it's you can be real. Yeah, it's a great level, and you can be happy there. I think, and that's what I work with. I've never met a kid. I work with kids from all ages, and I've never met a kid who doesn't want to go D1. And it's always one of my first questions is like, why D1? And they don't even have an answer. It's like, well, okay, it's part of the mindset. So, last question here, Coach, and we'll let you go. I always just ask what have I not asked that I should have asked? What pearls of wisdom do you have for me, for the coaches listening?
I think for young coaches, just take the job. I think so many times you get caught up with wanting the job you want. Sometimes you got to take one that's not great and make it great. Because that's how you develop a track record. You don't develop a track record by going somewhere where they already win, they're already established. You establish a track record by going somewhere where it's historically not been a good place, or historically doesn't pay well, or historically, they have bad kids there, or nobody's ever won there. That's how you become a good coach, learning through the tough times. You don't become a good coach when you're winning all the time and everything's easy. You really learn how to coach when the deck and the odds are stacked against you. You got to figure things out, and those are the most fun times when you see a group of kids come in one way and leave with their head up another way. And those are the ones you have lifetime relationships with, and you go to their weddings and you see them having
Yeah.
grandkids and kids, and now I mean it's just amazing to be a part of this coaching process and in college basketball.
I think that, yeah, I that's so important. Just that whole idea of there's an old expression that I know you from coaching, from the old, what is it? You can't make chicken salad out of chicken feathers, or whatever, or however you want to say it. And I think that so many coaches get caught up in that, and I do think a lot of coaches, the same sort of mental toughness that they're claiming their kids don't have, that sometimes I don't think they have it the way they need to either. Like, yeah, it's going to be hard for you too. Coaching isn't easy, right? It's going to be, you should have that same spirit that you're wanting your kids to have. And if you're not exempling that and embodying that, I think they pick up on that. So,
Right. You fail them because you can't consistently try to, fighting with them about letting me into your life without giving them the same, without opening up and letting them in yours. And that's where it is with kids nowadays. They just want to know what's up with you, and that is something very small and simple, but it's big to them. What's up, coach? Like literally, you just giving them 5 minutes of your time, and not talking about hoop. Checking on their family, checking how you're doing academically, their girlfriend, just a person, and not the points or the number on their back. Like, that's so important to these young people.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. It's the old, it's my way or the highway. It really doesn't work much anymore. And it's all about, if you want to get, the way you get that respect is by the information and letting them know you're on their team, right? And you're working with them.
No question.
It's fantastic stuff, Coach. I can't thank you enough for coming on, and it's just been great talking to you, and I sure appreciate it. And this has been the Mental Metal Podcast.
The Mental Metal Podcast is brought to you by our friends at Quick Cut. Quick Cut is the new alternative to Huddle. It's no secret why Quick Cut is the fastest growing platform in the country. Their video analysis platform has everything you need. Plus, you'll get triple the storage at about half the price. And now get even more when you use the promo code 50hours for 50 hours of free video storage. Make the switch. You'll be glad you did. Visit quickcut.com today. Coaches, empower your athletes to overcome adversity with the Mental Metal Academy. Teach them to face and conquer hardship without adding extra pressure. Visit the link in the show notes and enter the code METTLE, that's METTLE, at checkout for a special listener discount.
And I am back with some breakdown on that interview, and I just hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. Again, I loved it because it gave me so much validation for so many of the things I've been working on with athletes and coaches themselves. And if you listen to the advertisements on this podcast, one, thank you for listening to that. And two, you'll hear me sell some of my coaching services and the online class I have for coaches. And the interview today with Coach Lowery, I could not help but hear him exemplify so many of the ideas that I teach in that course. So for the breakdown today, I kind of want to point out some of the ideas that I heard on the interview that I obviously really agree with and think need to be discussed a little bit more for coaches in trying to help their athletes. And the first thing that I noticed, I didn't talk about this in the intro just because I wanted everybody to hear it, but experience as he said it. But I loved the conversation about AAU basketball. It's AAU basketball. It can be phenomenal. There's good, there's bad, but it's a necessity for coaches, recruiting coaches, because they're so busy during the year. It's hard for them to do. So they can get out on the recruiting trail in the summers. That's the biggest reason for the AAU it's useful for them. And when I asked him for what he looks at when he goes to AAU tournaments, you'll notice he didn't even talk about physical ability. He talked a little bit about winning, but he wasn't worried about jump shots, handles, dunks, any of those things. And honestly, he can tell all those things a lot by just which team you're on, and he can find that stuff on film. But he said, and his words were, "I'm there to people watch," which is, but if you've been to an AAU tournament, it's phenomenal, people watching. But what is he looking for there? Well, what he's looking for in to put it in a nutshell, he's looking for people's reactions to circumstances, okay? Both for the player and for the parent. Things like, how do they respond to officials? How do they respond to the coach? How do they work with the teammates? How do they handle themselves against tough competition? Things like that. When I work with players and coaches, I help them understand that a lot of mental toughness comes from their focus. Are you focusing on the things you can control, such as effort and attitude, or are you focusing on the things you cannot control, like refs, coaches, and other potentially bad situations? When a coach comes to you that's recruiting, he's looking for how you handle adversity and how well you dismiss the uncontrollables in your life. Do you focus on things you can control or things you can't? And a lot of that things like, arguing with a coach, arguing with a ref, the bad body language, almost all of those are in response to circumstances. So when he's people watching, it's seeing how people respond to adversity in these bad circumstances. So that's one thing that I really noticed. Another one was that I loved it when he said he wants players that want to be coached. And that seems like an obvious one, but it goes a little bit deeper to that, into the psychology. In order to want to be coached, you have to admit that you're not perfect, which is hard for some young athletes that have been, studs all their life. You have to be accepting of criticism, which is hard for everybody, right? And you have to always want to be striving to get better. In the coaching profession, those ideas, we call that having a growth mindset versus having a fixed mindset. And having this mindset means that you believe that you are able to improve, and it just is going to take time and effort to get there. Very few players come into the college level ready to compete as they are. So a recruiting coach is less interested in your current abilities than he's more interested in your ability to improve on your abilities, if that makes sense. You have to want to be coached in order to get better. You should honestly, a young player should want the criticism, should want to know what they need to get better. It's just a fundamental idea that I share with my clients and with my coaches that I work with. It's also an entire chapter in my course that I have for parents and coaches. And another quote that he said is one that we hear all the time. We hear people say, "Trust the process." Everybody knows that one. It's fun. You'll see it on t-shirts or different verses or different versions of it. But then he added to it. And he said, "Trust the process, but the process is hard." And that second part is so important, and it needs to be said more often. In order for us to grow, something needs to be hard, right? If we're always having it easy all the time, we don't grow. Adversity is not something we should be running from. It should be something that we should be seeking. If you know me at all, you hear me say those things all the time. You have to be okay with the hard in order to grow. But the trick is you have to have the right mindset for that to ever happen. You have to start changing the way you see the world, and that's not easy. If you are in a negative mindset and you cringe or run away when something is hard, it's hard for you to even understand that it's possible to feel different. But the brain is no different than a muscle. If you use it right, consistently, and practice something, you'll get better at various things. And if you start to look at the world a little bit differently, it's hard at first, but you can change and become more ready to face that difficult process. Again, in my course, I really lay down some of the stuff about neuroplasticity and neural pathways and how they can be developed. They're absolutely something that you can change. So if you aren't okay with the process being hard, then you're not going to grow that much. So you have to change your mindset around seeking that adversity and wanting things to be difficult. Yet another thing he said, just how much emphasis I picked up from Coach Lowery on positivity. It came out often. I heard him say several things. He said, a happy player is a good player. That's a great idea. Pick a school that loves you, not one that you like the colors or the team that you like the mascot. Pick the school that loves you. And my favorite on the positivity, we were talking about running and working hard and really pushing them. But then he said, as the coach, you have to have that consistent positive talk. And I love that because words matter. As coaches, you need to be the example for the type of words that you want an athlete to have in their own internal voice. The most confident and the happiest players have positive, strong, confident internal voices. You have to model that for them, and you have to promote it, and you have to practice it. The research on this is undeniable. Positive voices and positive internal voices yield positive results, and negative voices and negative internal voices yield negative results. It's that easy. You cannot have a negative mindset and expect a positive result. It doesn't work. It's okay to be hard on a player. It's okay to be frustrated. It's hard. It's okay to get on them. But you have to understand that your mindset and your words become their mindset and their internal voices. So you have to be cognizant of that. Again, I have an entire chapter devoted to this idea of voices in athletes and why it's so important and how to develop them. So it was great to hear him talk about using that constant positive voice. I could go on and really geek out on some of the things he talked about. But like I said, I've probably said enough here. And even without my commentary, Coach Lowery did a phenomenal job of illustrating so many of the ideas I preach and teach to athletes and coaches. The bottom line is that the mindset of an athlete is fundamental to success. And if you aren't being intentional about improving it, then you are not doing everything you can as a coach. So that's it. Thanks for listening. And this has been the Mental Metal Podcast with Coach Matt Toman. Thanks again for listening to the Mental Metal Podcast, produced by Coraggio Media, sponsored by QuickCut, a video management platform for every level of play, and by Mental Metal Coaching, helping athletes learn to face adversity in a spirited and resilient way. The Mental Metal Podcast is created each week to help players develop more mental toughness, and that is something that will help all of us. So help me out and like and share the Mental Metal Podcast with your friends. Until next time, keep forging your metal.